This is a fun album, I think. It's what you may expect slash hope for in an early 70s hard rock kind of early heavy metal recording, kind of crunchy riffs, kind of thunderous drumming and big, just a great big kind of slower sound in general. I was wondering, I'm obviously like with Froggy Beavers from the Pond and the previous album we discussed, which is Rhinoceros, Rhinoceros, I believe. It's something you're drawn to by seeing the YouTube thumbnail, much as back in the day you would have been drawn to it perhaps in a record shop via the album art. Now we're reduced to a YouTube thumbnail where more people are listening to it than ever, to be fair. Now, why is it that this album is enjoyable? I can't just be projecting the album art, which is quite interesting and captivating, onto this music. What is it? Why is it entertaining? Well, we'll go through that as we explore the history of this group via the Free Encyclopedia. Toad were a Swiss hard rock band formed in Basel, Switzerland in 1970. The band went through lineup changes, but the longest lasting and most consistent lineup was a trio of Vic Vergiat on lead guitar and vocals, and Brain Ticket members Werner Frohlich on bass and vocals, and Cosimo Lampis on drums. Their best known songs were covers of Jimi Hendrix's Purple Haze and the Beatles' I Saw Her Standing There, along with originals used in My Life and Stay. Their first two albums were engineered by Martin Birch. We're reading out his bio just shortly. I've explained Martin Birch time and again on this program, I believe, especially given the recent Deep Purple discussions, and we've talked about Iron Maiden's 80s albums before here, obviously on the CC question mark. Although we're going to elaborate on why Martin Birch is that special. We hit other people's words on why. Though the band was not commercially successful outside of their own country, they were a popular live act because of their ferocity, musicianship, and stage antics, most notably when Vergiat played the guitar with his teeth. Their concerts were often compared to those of Jimi Hendrix. I'm sure they would have been happy to hear that. Toad was formed in 1970 by guitarist Vittorio Vic Vergiat, who was briefly in the British space rock group Hawkwind, and bassist Werner Frohlich and drummer Cosimo Lampis, both of whom left the European psychedelic rock band Brain Ticket after the recording of their first album, Cottonwood Hill. Cottonwood Hill is so good. It's just, if you're into that sort of thing, Cottonwood Hill is just a blessing. Toad began writing and recording material for an album in late 1970, and in 1971 released their self-titled album and the single Stay, which did fairly well. It made a great deal of headway in the Swiss charts, a feat that no other hard rock band had accomplished. The album was mixed by the British producer Martin Birch, who also produced for Deep Purple, Iron Maiden, and Black Sabbath. The album also features Benny Jaeger on vocals, who would leave once the album was finished. As their first album was being released in 1971, Toad performed at the Montreux Jazz Festival and was recorded live by the Swiss television, but the footage was lost, and to date there seems to be no further copy. In 1972, the band released Tomorrow Blue, which was in a more blues direction and without a lead vocalist, with Vergiat and Frohlich taking over vocal duties. Like their first album, it was engineered by Birch. It included Helmut Lipski on violin, who played prominently on the tracks Blind Chapman's Tales, Change in Time, and the single Green Ham. Later the same year, the band recorded the album Open Fire live in Basel 1972, which included covers of Hendrix's Red House and the Band of Gypsies' Who Knows. They waited until 1974 to release their third album, Dreams, which featured the popular single Purple Haze. The history after that is largely undocumented, except for a live album recorded in Geneva during 1978 and a studio album released in the early 1990s with different versions of the band. The rest of the 1970s and 1980s was spent appearing on a few compilations, releasing live albums and performing, while slowly fading into relative obscurity. Sometime between 1979 and 1988, bassist Frohlich left the group and was replaced by Kelvin Bullen. After he too departed from the group in the early 1990s, he was replaced by Andre Buser, who would remain with the band until its end. In 1986, Toad made an appearance at the St. Gallen Open Air Festival in St. Gallen, Switzerland. In 1993, Toad released the studio album Stop This Crime. Following its release, the drummer Lampis departed from the group and was replaced by Claudio Salsi, who remained until Toad broke up. Lampis went on to create a school in Sardinia. In 1994, Toad played a concert in Brain, Switzerland, which provided the material for the live album The Real Thing. In about 1995, Toad broke up, following which the album Hate to Hate was released. It contained the same tracks as Stop This Crime, but with a different cover and title. Vergiat went on to a solo career, releasing many albums over the years. He then formed and toured with his own band, the Vic Vergiat Band. He still records and plays live to this day, mostly in Europe. The other former members went on to other groups or retired from the music business. The band never achieved great success outside of their own country, but were influential on the Swiss heavy metal movement during the 1980s, influencing Crocus and Celtic Frost. They saw renewed interest in the early 2000s among the European hard rock scene. The albums have been re-released and remastered for new generations of listeners, and a CD box set, packaged to look like miniature vinyl records, was released. Now on to Martin Birch. Martin Birch, 27th of December 1948 to, unfortunately, 9th of August 2020, was a British music producer and sound engineer. He became renowned for engineering and producing albums recorded predominantly by British rock bands, including Deep Purple, Rainbow, Fleetwood Mac, Whitesnake, Black Sabbath, Blue Oyster Cult, and Iron Maiden. Birch was born on the 27th of December 1948 in Woking, Surrey. He began his career in music as an audio engineer of Jeff Beck, Fleetwood Mac, and Deep Purple, producing and engineering 11 albums for the latter. In 1980, coming from the Deep Purple camp, he was called upon by Black Sabbath for Heaven and Hell. The band's previous albums had been self-produced, and they were happy to let Birch, who had worked with Ronnie James Dio before, produce them. His bright mid-range on the album is especially noted. He began a long tenure working exclusively with Iron Maiden in 1981, producing and engineering Killers, and retiring from working with other bands for a while. Birch also produced and engineered albums for numerous artists. These included Deep Purple-related projects, Rainbow, Pace Ashton Lord, Whitesnake, Roger Glover, and John Lord, but also encompassed Wayne County and the Electric Chairs. On Fleetwood Mac's album Mystery to Me, 1973, he is also credited playing acoustic guitar. The song Hard Love and Man from the Deep Purple album Deep Purple in Rock is dedicated to him for Martin Birch. Catalyst. Birch retired in 1992 after producing Iron Maiden's Fear of the Dark album. It was the last of the 10 records he produced with the group. He appeared in Iron Maiden's music video Holy Smoke 2 years before his retirement. Birch died on the 9th of August 2020 at age 71. The cause of death was undisclosed. Initial tributes were paid by David Coverdale, Geezer Butler, and Wendy Dio. Members of Iron Maiden offered a lengthy tribute to Birch on their official website, with Steve Harris, Bruce Dickinson, and Rod Smallwood reflecting on his personality and his time working with the band. If you'd like to pay Martin Birch some tribute, do listen to Toad's 1971 album and consider what would have been different if he was not involved. A producer can add a lot to a recording. If you're so inclined, do give Toad 1971 a listen. You might find it very enjoyable if you're into early 70s hard rock, kind of slower, again, the earlier heavy metal stylings. Thanks again, my friends.